comes in a variety of styles. Beginners, as I noted in my previous sermon, are subject to frost. Those who are more experienced in Christian living deal with subtle, cunning, little foxes. Such vices disguise themselves as virtues. Ah, I like that. I observed some who were running a good race, then a little fox sprang up among them. They began to rationalize. Why am I keeping all this to myself? I could be sharing it with others. I am wasting my time here. I will go help them. I will lead them to salvation. If I am doing good works, it really doesn't matter where I am. It is best to be where I can be helpful to others. The little fox wins. He leaves us. Of them, the proverb is true. A dog returns to its vomit. A sow that is washed goes back to her wallowing in the mud. Fervent souls are vulnerable to many little foxes. Even the desire to live for a while in a hermitage can be misguided. It is possible to become inattentive while living alone. Such little foxes are small only because they are subtle. They are difficult to identify and can do enormous damage. Are you following what he's getting at with this? He's talking about, in terms of the Song of Solomon, I would say, if I may interpret St. Bernard, he just praised her for her virtue, being a dove, etc. And now he's adjuring her to beware. Catch the little foxes, lest they ruin our vineyard. The vineyard meaning the garden of their love. If we want to talk greater allegory, this is our relationship with God. God and I are building a love relationship together. And he is adjuring me to be careful to watch out for these little vices that come and spoil the garden that we are building together. And Bernard is just talking about how subtle these can be and to be wary of them, and that they come in different degrees. The beginner, the early on, the novice in the spiritual life will get a different kind of fox than those who are more progressed in the spiritual life. Remember, this whole thing, these three books in the Bible, actually, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and the Song of Songs, are considered kind of stepping stones to the spiritual life. And this is the apex of it. This is the crown virtue of it. This love relationship with God. This passionate love relationship with God. The bridegroom has commanded us to catch them. He does not tell us to kill them or shoo them away. They are dangerously cunning. They need to be trapped and diligently watched. Interesting, he says that. Trapped and watched. Keep guard over your heart. He catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are swept away. The little fox that ruins the vineyards is caught when he is identified and exposed. This renders it harmless. I would add what he's talking about is saying it in confession. Confession depotentiates the sin. That's why frequent confession is so good for the soul. Because the more that we acknowledge our weakness, the more that we acknowledge we need God's grace, not only do we get the grace to continue to fight the good fight, but it constantly keeps those sins in check. Constantly keeps them in check. I know more than anyone else my own weaknesses and my own shortcomings. I don't need anyone else to tell me. Believe me, I know myself. And as I get deeper in the spiritual walk, you know what I discover? There are parts that I didn't even think were sin. Now, once they are exposed, I confess and I move away from those. But it's something that you don't get until you get at a certain level. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Am I making sense here? Yes. Amen? Okay, good. Let me finish this sermon. This renders it harmless. To recognize it is to defeat it. We do not step into traps we can see. So it's all about knowing your own soul, knowing your own limitations, knowing your own weaknesses. I'll never forget one time I was, I'll share this. I remember going to confession, and the priest asked me, he goes, you know, my son, what do you think is your worst sin? And I said, I think it's lust, Father.
Lust?
Lust. That's my weakness. And he said, you're wrong. I said, what do you mean? I know my weakness. Didn't you hear my confession? What's wrong? He goes, it's not lust, my son, it's pride. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you think you can do it all on your own. You can't. That's your chief weakness. And that was such an eye-opening experience for me. I thought it was one thing, and through this holy priest, he told me, no, your chief sin is pride. And that's why we need confession. That's why we all need confession. And I said, you're right, Father. You're right. And so from then, I've been very much in check about my own self because of that. But it's that kind of, if you will, spiritual surgery that if the Spirit is really moving in that situation, you can get some good insights into your own life that will transform how you go to confession, what you think is a sin and what is not. Does that make sense?
What made you think it was lust?
Because I know my own weaknesses. Let's just say.
It could be lust for life.
It could, but that's not what I was meaning. So, he said, no, it was pride. And I was like, I like that. I like that.
So the lust is okay?
The lust is okay. Yes, that's right.
Still one of the 7 cardinals.
It is. It's still bad. But when you think it's one thing and it's something deeper that you wouldn't normally have seen, that was the insight that helped me grow in my own spiritual walk.
Is that lust is one of the 7 deadly sins?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Pride, lust, anger, covetousness, envy, sloth. And gluttony. I forgot gluttony.
Pride, covetousness, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, sloth.
Yeah. Places G. That's how I remember them. What do you mean places G? Pride, lust, anger, covetousness, envy, sloth, and gluttony. Places G. That's the 7 deadly sins. Or they're called the chief sins. Let me finish with St. Bernard here. Very interesting how he ends this allegory. Another interpretation of the allegory is to read the vines as the churches and the foxes as heretics. Our job is not to chase them away, but to catch them. We do this without force or violence. It is done with debate and strong argument. I like his style. I like him. I really do. We can disapprove their erroneous ideas. The bridegroom says, catch for us the foxes. He speaks on behalf of the entire church. Convincing a heretic of his error is an important task. We demolish arguments and every pretense that sets itself against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. This amounts to catching a fox for the bride and the bridegroom. Even if the heretic does not change his position, the church is protected and strengthened in the faith. The bridegroom commands us to catch the foxes for the good of everyone, including himself, on an equal basis. Now I know that sounds kind of archaic language, a heretic. But for him, that was an important word to say. So, I like his style. We do it without force or violence, but with debate and strong argument. In other words, know your faith and be able to tell someone about it. That would be a subtle way of saying it. So that's more or less, it's not more or less, that's pretty much where St. Bernard leaves us off. Yes?
I just have a question.
Uh-huh.
At the first two chapters, it's total 24 verses, 17 and the first chapter and 17. And you see that he said very little, and the rest is still the lover said. And
Yes.
He said, chapter 1, he said only 5 verses, and chapter 2, only 3 short verses.
Uh-huh.
Is this supposed to be another way around?
Is this what?
Supposed to be another way around. I mean, he talk very little.
Yes.
I mean, this is Song of Songs.
Right.
And he's supposed to say along, not like the other, you know?
Yeah, well, part of what, that's a good observation. I would say part of that has to do with the initial, the wooing of the individual soul has a lot to say for God's initial call. God calls, and then our response is a bunch of exuberant speech as a result of that call. It's an elation of joy that comes about. And I would say that that's what's being described here. She is so thrilled about this love relationship that she's just exuberant about it, just speaking very much about it. He doesn't have to say much. She is just in response to this love call that he has given to her. That would be my reaction to that. He has far more to say in chapter 4 about the beloved when we get there. But overall, it's more of a response to God's initial call. We have, if you will, a lot to say about that. That would be my reaction to that. Does that help? Yeah?
Actually, normally, if you go for a day, you talk a lot, you're not going to be quiet, right?
Well, when you have this kind of love relationship, all you'd want to do is talk about it. You see this in people who have had dramatic conversion experiences. I know this from my evangelical days. People who had, lived a very licensed life, and then they converted. They just want to talk about it all the time. They're just so enthusiastic about all that they have. We used to remark that this was the new converts' a honeymoon phase. We literally called it a honeymoon phase because it was like you could tell the new converts. They were early at church. They were greeting everyone. They were just smiling all the time. They had an exuberance about this new life in Christ that they found. And it was always such a pleasure. We never wanted to jade it, we who had been, saved for so many years, as we would say. We need that fresh breath of new converts to remind us of what it was like when we were first in love with Jesus. And in equivalent terms, I would say, this is the joy that we feel when we go to a wedding. Everyone's happy about it, even though it's not mine. It's just the idea of being there to just share in this love. That's what would this be like. So when you're a part of that, you want to just talk about it, is what I want to say. So let's go on. My beloved is mine and I am his. Verse 16. This is one of, remember, 3 verses that say the same thing throughout this song. This is, I would say, the theme verse of the entire Song of Songs. My beloved is mine and I am his. We see this again in chapter 6, verse 3, and in chapter 7, verse 10. I am my beloved and he is mine. This is the theme verse. He pastures his flocks among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, like a gazelle or a young stag upon rugged mountains. This gives us the idea that this is, if we look at this poem as written by Solomon in his younger days, her description of him as a young stag is a symbol of his virility as well as his youthful qualities. It's not that he's in his 20s, but he's probably in his 30s. But he still has this vigor about him that she describes him more than once so far as a young stag. Did you notice that? And again, this is a virility symbol. It's a sign that he is full of passion. Okay? Because it is an erotic symbol. It is an erotic symbol. It is meant to be what it is intended to say about him, that he is youthful, he's vigorous, and that he is, he's got this vitality about him that is very appealing. Upon my bed by night, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but gave no answer. So he's not there, and she is again lovesick for him. So she goes through the towns saying, have you seen my beloved? You notice that? I will rise now and go into the city, into the streets, into the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The watchmen found me, and they said as they went about the city. Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. That is exactly what is intended for it to say. It's a very intimate meeting. I would say it's at this point that we are moving from the courtship into the marriage. This is the part in